The night shift in the ER at Memorial Hospital is something you get used to, or at least you think you do. But no matter how many codes you've run, how many lives you've touched and lost, there's always one case, one night, that never leaves you. One moment that blurs the line between what's real and what shouldn't be. For me, that moment came with a case that, to this day, I can't explain. Trauma Room 3 will always haunt me, and every time I think back to it, I feel a chill. Even now, years later. It was just past 3 a.m., the kind of hour where the world outside feels suspended between two realities, night and morning, life and death. The ER had that muted hum, the sound of a place where nothing stops, but everything moves in a kind of quiet chaos. Then the radio crackled. The words came through loud and clear. Male, 45, full cardiac arrest, down for over 20 minutes before EMS arrival. CPR in progress, ATA, 2 minutes. My team and I didn't need to speak. We'd been through this routine so many times it was like muscle memory. Trauma Room 3 was prepped before the door even opened. Monitor lead set out, intubation tray ready, and the Lucas device waiting at the foot of the bed, its straps unbuckled. We were prepared for another fight to save someone's life. When the paramedics wheeled him in, I caught the distinct smell of sweat and diesel. The air felt thick, heavy, like the room itself was bracing for the inevitable. The man's skin was pale, waxy, his lips already a dull, unnatural blue. His chest barely rose and fell as the Lucas device continued its mechanical rhythm, pumping with a steady thump. The paramedic lead's voice was sharp and clipped, the kind of voice you hear when time is running out. Downtime, 23 minutes. One shock delivered, no sustained rhythm, multiple epi rounds. We worked him, the room a blur of movement and sound. Compressions, medications, airway checks, and the flat line of the monitor, constant reminder of how little time we had. Every now and then, that flat line would spike, but it always faded. A jagged, desperate rhythm that would die as quickly as it came. I could feel it in my bones. We were running out of road. The voice calling out the times got slower, the space between commands growing longer. The sound of the Lucas device felt heavier, slower, like it too knew this was a losing battle. Then came the look from the attending, that subtle nod. It was time. All right, we're stopping, he said, the words settling in the room like a weight too heavy to ignore. Time of death, 3:07 a.m. It wasn't a surprise. Not really. It never is, after so much effort. But this case felt different, like we'd crossed some invisible line. I silenced the monitor, and the absence of that constant beeping hit me in a way I hadn't expected. The room felt emptier, but it wasn't just the lack of noise. It was a deep, unsettling silence that seemed to stretch beyond the walls. The wife, her eyes wide, stood frozen in the doorway. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the man's wedding ring. She hadn't even noticed we were moving him to the bed. Her gaze never left him as we adjusted the sheets, the cold, lifeless body beneath them. She stepped forward, placing the ring back on his finger, whispering something too soft for me to hear. But the way her lips trembled told me it was a goodbye. That should have been the end of it. I turned to finish my charting, preparing for post-mortem care. But then I felt it. Something shifted in the room. The air grew thick again, like it had moments ago. A presence. I was standing at the foot of the bed, my eyes flicking to the corner of the room. It was nothing just shadows, but I could feel it, something watching me, something waiting. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. Then the monitor beeped. One sharp, clean sound. My heart stopped. It had been flatlined for over 10 minutes. The wave on the screen started slow, a thin quiver, then spiked again. Another spike, and another. The rhythms weren't perfect, far from it, but they were there. I thought for a moment someone had reconnected the leads by mistake, but no, the leads were in place, still attached to the patient. Check a pulse, the attending ordered, his voice low, cautious. I slid my fingers into place, expecting nothing, but there it was, a faint, weak pulse. I froze. We've got spontaneous circulation, the attending muttered, disbelief in his tone. Let's get him on oxygen, warm him up. The room came alive again, but the air, the feeling in the room, didn't shift. It had changed the moment the man's heart started beating again, but it wasn't just his heartbeat that had returned. Something else had woken up with him. I watched the man carefully, my stethoscope pressed to his chest. He blinked slowly, his eyelids fluttering open. But his gaze wasn't focused on me or the wife, no. His eyes were fixed on something else, something just beyond me. I stepped closer, trying to get his attention. Sir, you're in the ER. You've been in cardiac arrest, but we're taking care of you now. Can you hear me? Can you tell me your name? He blinked again, his lips parting, but it wasn't words. His voice was faint, raspy, but clear enough for me to hear. "Don't let her touch me." I felt my stomach turn. "She's here," he whispered, his eyes still locked on the same empty corner of the room. "She's been here. She's waiting." I didn't look. I couldn't, but I could feel it. The weight in the corner. A presence that shouldn't be there. His breathing hitched as he continued. "Dark hair, pale skin. She's been waiting for me." The words left a chill on my skin, and I could feel the others in the room stiffen. The wife didn't say a word. She simply leaned closer to him, her grip tightening on his hand, as if trying to shield him from whatever he was seeing. But even she didn't look at the corner. Her eyes stayed fixed on her husband, as though acknowledging what he saw wasn't something she wanted to face. The air in the room seemed to shift again, heavier this time, as though something was closing in. And then, for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. A subtle change. A slight distortion in the shadows near the wall, where the corner should have been empty. It wasn't the lighting. It was thicker, like the darkness had weight. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to acknowledge it, but I had to. The wife's voice broke through the silence, her tone calm but resigned. "She's here again," she said softly. Not a question, but a statement. "She's always here when he's at his worst." I could hear the breath catch in my throat, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from that corner. Whatever had been watching me watching us was still there, and I felt something I couldn't explain. Something I didn't want to acknowledge. It was as though I wasn't alone in that room anymore. I don't know what exactly I expected to happen next. In the ER, you learn to live in the gray. Patients can come back from the edge, but they can also slip away at the most unexpected moments. But there was something else at play that night, something I couldn't place, and the more I tried to rationalize it, the more the unexplainable crept in. The patient's eyes didn't leave that corner. His lips moved in that slow, deliberate way, speaking to someone I couldn't see. "She's standing there," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "waiting for me." The wife, still holding his hand, didn't respond, but her eyes flicked toward the corner. She didn't need to look. She already knew. It was as if this had happened before, as though she had been living in the shadow of something her husband couldn't escape, something that had been following him for months. "We've got to stabilize him," the attending said sharply, cutting through the tension that had slowly enveloped the room. But his voice didn't sound as firm as usual. There was an edge to it now, an unspoken unease that none of us dared to acknowledge aloud. I moved to check the patient's vitals. His pulse was weak but steady. His blood pressure had started to stabilize. For all intents and purposes, he was alive, back from the brink of death. And yet, the unease in the room persisted. His breathing was shallow, but every time I checked the monitor, I couldn't help but feel an electric charge in the air, something pulsing beneath the surface, something I couldn't see but could feel. Suddenly, there was a quiet movement behind me. I turned to see Martia, one of our senior nurses, standing at the doorway. Her face was pale, her posture stiff. She didn't enter the room, but she handed a folder to the attending, her eyes never quite meeting mine. Without saying a word, she turned and left, her steps soft but hurried. The attending opened the folder. I couldn't make out the details from where I stood, but I saw the words male mid-50s, post-arrest, regained consciousness, reported seeing a woman in a nurse's uniform. His brow furrowed, and his lips tightened as he tucked the folder under his arm, but he didn't speak a word. Not a comment, not even a glance toward me. Just a quick nod, and then a return to the patient. I felt a knot in my stomach. I wanted to ask, to push, but something held me back. I didn't want to know more. Not now. Not when the tension in the room was already unbearable. The man's voice broke the silence again. "She said she's been waiting for me, told me she'd take me when it was my time." I caught the attending's eyes flicking to me, then away, as if we were both listening to something we couldn't explain. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the shift in him. He was no longer the calm, methodical doctor I was used to. There was something in his eyes now, a flicker of doubt. I leaned in close to the patient, trying to focus on the medical side of things. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice almost lost under the weight of the question. The patient didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed fixed on that same empty corner of the room, and his lips parted again. "She told me she's the one who collects us, all of us. She's the one who waits." A chill ran down my spine. The wife, who had been silent for so long, finally spoke. "He's been saying this for weeks," she said quietly. "He talks about her when he's awake. He talks about her when he's asleep. I thought it was a dream, but it's not. It's real to him. It's real to both of us." I turned to look at her. She wasn't scared. At least, not in the way I'd expect. There was no disbelief, no horror in her eyes. It was as if she had long accepted whatever this was. My hands felt cold as I adjusted the oxygen mask on the patient, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't just a hallucination. She wasn't dismissing it. She knew. She stands in the same spot, the man continued, his voice growing weaker. In the shadows, she's always been there, waiting for me to come. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of confusion that had settled over me. What was he talking about? Was this a symptom of post-arrest delirium? Or was there something more? I caught Martia's eyes through the window as she passed by the door. She didn't stop. She didn't look back, but I saw it. The way she paused, her gaze lingering on the man in the bed, before she disappeared down the hall. It was the way you look at someone when you know something they don't. When you know something you can't say. I forced myself to focus. There was still a patient in front of me. Vitals, fluids, stabilization. But the strange feeling never left. The wife's voice was steady, but there was a heaviness in her tone now. I told him that if she wanted him, she'd have to go through me first. The room felt too small, like the walls were closing in. There was no sound now, except the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, the occasional rustle of paper, and the steady hum of the ventilator. But it wasn't enough to drown out the sensation that someone was there with us, watching us, waiting. I heard it before I saw it, a soft whisper, so close to my ear that I flinched. It was barely a breath, but it was there. She's waiting, it said, a voice too calm, too gentle to be real. I turned quickly, but there was nothing but shadows. The room was still, too still, the air thick with tension, and yet the wife didn't flinch. She didn't move. She just held her husband's hand, her thumb rubbing over his knuckles. Then, he spoke again, his voice raspy but clear. She says it's time. She's going to take me now. She's waiting. My hands trembled as I checked the monitor. His pulse was steady, but I could feel an undercurrent of dread. It was no longer about saving him. It was about something else. Something I couldn't name, but I could feel it with every breath, every pulse. She's here, the wife whispered, her voice barely audible, and she's not leaving until she's taken him. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't speak. The presence in the room was too real, too close. And just as suddenly as it had started, the alarms went off. Beeping, loud, sharp. The room erupted into action again. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't just the patient we were trying to save. It was something else. And whatever it was, it wasn't finished with us yet. The room was chaotic once again. The alarms blared, the beeping sharp and insistent, and the attending barked orders with mechanical precision. But through it all, I could hear that quiet voice in the back of my mind, the same one I'd heard whispering earlier. The woman's voice. It was soft, calm, almost soothing, but it wasn't right. It was wrong. It didn't belong. Push the norepinephrine. Get another liter of saline in. The attending's voice snapped me back into focus. We moved quickly, following orders with practiced efficiency. I grabbed the warm saline, feeling the steady thrum of the pulse beneath my fingertips as I squeezed the bag. The patient's heart rate was high, erratic, but his blood pressure was low, too low, but still holding on. His eyes never left the corner. His gaze never wavered. Whatever was there, whatever he was seeing, it had him completely, and for the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had a hold on all of us. "Sir, can you hear me?" I leaned over him, trying to keep my voice steady, to ignore the strange weight pressing on my chest. I checked the monitor again. His heart rate spiked, 150 BPM and climbing. His oxygen saturation dropped to the low 80s. His pulse was still thready, faint, but there. No response. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the corner, unblinking, but I could feel it. I could feel him trying to speak again, his lips moving in that slow, deliberate way. "She's coming," he whispered, each word a breath, barely audible. "She says it's time." I turned to the wife, but she wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed, not on me, but on the shadows by the wall, the same place the patient was staring. Her hand tightened around his, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. I felt the atmosphere shift. It wasn't the usual tension that comes with a code. It wasn't the cold clinical focus of saving a life. No, this was something else. This was something more visceral, more primal. Something in the room felt different. The temperature had dropped, but that wasn't it. It was something about the way the shadows clung to the walls. Something about the way the air felt thick with a presence we couldn't see. "Give him another round of epi," the attending ordered, but his voice was distant, almost mechanical. His hands were still working, still moving, but there was something in his eyes, something in the way he wouldn't look at the corner of the room. I didn't need to ask why. The Lucas device thumped steadily, the sound almost deafening now as it hammered against the patient's chest. Every compression felt like it was being driven by something outside of us, like there was no choice but to keep pushing, keep fighting. And then it happened. The room fell quiet, like the whole building had stopped breathing. For one brief, terrifying second, the alarms stopped. The machines fell silent. I froze. We all froze. The shadows in the corner grew darker, thicker. I could see it now, see the movement. It was as though something was shifting, something moving just out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. It wasn't the lighting. It wasn't a trick of the eyes. It was something. The patient's pulse dropped. The heart rate monitor screeched. He flatlined. The sound of the monitor was deafening, like it was screaming at us to give up, to stop. But I couldn't move. None of us could. And then, just as quickly, the pulse returned. Weak, faint, but there. The heart rate began to climb slowly again, but I could feel the fear creeping in. It wasn't the typical post-arrest recovery we were used to. This wasn't the rhythm of a body fighting to survive. This was something else. Something deeper. Push another round of epi, the attending said, but it wasn't with the same certainty I'd heard earlier. This time, his voice wavered. We need to stabilize him now. I moved to adjust the ventilator tubing, but my hands shook. I couldn't stop looking at the corner. I couldn't stop feeling like something was right there, standing just out of reach. Do you hear that? I whispered, my voice so quiet it was almost lost in the beeping and hissing of the machines. The respiratory therapist didn't respond. His hands were shaking as he adjusted the ventilator, his eyes flicking nervously toward the far wall. The wife stood, her grip still firm on her husband's hand, her eyes never leaving the corner. She had the same look on her face, the same quiet resignation that she wasn't about to back down. She wasn't afraid, but she was waiting for something she knew was inevitable. I wanted to say something, anything to break the silence, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt the coldness of the air pressing against me, tightening around my chest. And then I heard it again. That voice, low, calm, almost soothing. She's here, it whispered, so close to my ear that I could feel the breath on my skin. And you can't stop her. I jerked back, spinning around, but there was nothing. There was no one. The room was empty save for the patient, the wife, and the team working tirelessly to keep him alive. But I knew what I'd heard. And I knew that whatever was in the corner wasn't just watching us. It was waiting for something. It was waiting for him. The attending took a deep breath, his hand shaking as he scribbled something in the chart. We've got him stable for now, he said, but his tone was cautious. Get him to CCU. Let's move. We went through the motions, adjusting lines, securing the IVs, preparing for the transfer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the room wasn't empty. It was still there. The presence. When we moved the gurney, the shadows in the corner seemed to follow, stretching longer, darker, heavier. The lights flickered. I glanced at the wife. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She was looking past her husband, her eyes focused on something that wasn't there, but that she could see. Something none of us could. She's not done with him, she said, her voice so calm it was unnerving, and she won't let him go. Not yet. The door to the room opened. The transport team came in, quiet, methodical, moving with the precision of people who had seen too many things they couldn't explain. And as the gurney was wheeled out of the room, I felt it. That pull, that undeniable sensation that something, someone, was still in the room with us. The ER was still busy. The same noise, the same chaos, that never truly stops. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the room, that trauma room 3, would never be the same again. Because whatever had happened there, whatever was still waiting for that man, was not something I could explain. And for the first time in my life, I didn't know if I ever wanted to know. As I walked down the hall, away from the trauma bay, I caught a glimpse of the wife, standing near the vending machines, her coffee still in hand. She looked at me with those same, steady eyes, like she knew something I didn't, something I wasn't ready to face. She's not done, she whispered, her words a chilling echo in the air. And I realized then, as I turned away, that trauma room 3 would haunt me forever. It would haunt all of us. Because some things you don't walk away from. Some things follow you. The ER was alive with the usual chaos, the rapid steps of doctors, nurses, and medtechs, all moving with purpose, all tethered to the same grim rhythm of life and death. But for me, that night, the world outside trauma room 3 felt distant, like it wasn't even real. Inside that room, time seemed to stretch and bend, warping in a way that made everything feel wrong. The echoes of that night still linger, even as I sit here now, years later, trying to piece it all together. The last time I saw him before everything changed, his pulse was weak, but he was alive. We'd stabilized him after his second cardiac arrest, the kind of miracle you never expect. and he was on his way to the CCU, or so I thought. The team worked with practiced efficiency, but there was something off. Something that made the air feel thick, heavy. As we wheeled him out of the room, the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, clinging to the walls like they had a mind of their own. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been in the corner with him was following. I watched the transport team move his gurney through the hallway, every step heavy with that unsettling presence that seemed to haunt us, but I couldn't look away from the doorway. Not yet, not until the last echo of their footsteps faded into the distance. And then, that's when I heard it, a whisper, so close it might have been my own breath, but it wasn't. She's still here. She's still waiting. I froze. My eyes flicked to the empty doorway. My pulse quickened, but I couldn't make myself move. The sound wasn't something that should have been there. It wasn't natural. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks, but I knew better. No matter how much I tried to rationalize, there was something inside me that knew something I couldn't ignore. I turned to leave the hallway, wanting to put as much distance as I could between myself and trauma room 3. But as I walked, something caught my eye. The wife. She was standing near the vending machines, her coffee cup in hand, untouched, the same steady expression on her face as before. But now, there was something different in her gaze. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were focused just beyond me, a fixed, faraway look, like she was seeing something I couldn't, something I shouldn't, ma'am. I asked softly, my voice feeling like it was too loud in the silence. She didn't answer immediately. She didn't even glance at me. She just stood there, staring into that empty space, as though she were waiting for something to emerge from the shadows. It wasn't until I took another step closer that she turned her gaze toward me. Her eyes met mine, steady but empty, like she had already seen too much. "She's still here," she said, her voice calm, eerily calm, as if she were stating an inconvenient truth. "You can feel it, can't you?" I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling on my chest like an anchor. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. There was nothing I could say that would explain what had happened in that room. Nothing that would make sense of the shadows or the whispers or the strange, growing feeling that I wasn't alone, even now. I tried to find my voice, but it caught in my throat. What do you mean?" I asked, my own uncertainty betraying me. My hands felt cold, like I had stepped into a place I wasn't supposed to be. "Don't be afraid," she said softly, the words hanging in the air between us. "She won't harm you, she just waits. She waits for us." The way she said it, like she already understood the unexplainable, like she had been living with it for longer than I could comprehend, left me speechless. My chest tightened as I searched for some way to respond, but I couldn't. I felt her words like a weight in my stomach. It was as though she was telling me something I didn't want to know, something that I wasn't ready to face. And then, with a deep, almost imperceptible sigh, she took a step back, her eyes returning to the empty space beyond me. She didn't look at me again. She didn't need to. I stood there for a moment longer, the feeling of being watched pressing down on me, making it harder to breathe. I wanted to leave. I wanted to forget, to move on like I had so many times before, but I couldn't. Not this time. The memory of Trauma Room 3 wouldn't let me. The shadows in the corner, the whispers in the silence, the patient who had looked into that empty space with terror and resignation in his eyes, and the way his wife had known, even before the code had been called, that it wasn't over, that she wasn't done with him yet. I turned and walked away, feeling a presence at my back, knowing that whatever had been waiting in that room was still waiting, not just for him, but for all of us. The ER kept moving, the usual rhythm of the department picking up again, but for me, the world had changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that I'd crossed some boundary I couldn't undo. I didn't look back at Trauma Room 3, but I could still feel it, like the room itself was reaching out, pulling me back into its dark, waiting embrace. And as I walked down the hallway, the last thing I heard was that soft, familiar whisper, "She's still here." The words I couldn't unhear, the presence I couldn't shake. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how far I ran, Trauma Room 3 would never let me go.